Welcome everyone to our channel, Egypt Travel Expert. Travel channel for elite travelers looking for a unique travel experience in Egypt. We hope that you join us in our trips in order to find the best places and the exotic destinations in Egypt, so you have the best tour of your life. In today's video, we are going to talk about God Horus and his temple in the city of Edfu. In the previous video, we talked about goddess Isis and how she resisted the evil god Set, the usurper of the throne of Egypt, and she did not surrender, and she kept looking for her husband's body, the killed king of Egypt, Osiris, and she was able to bring him back to life once more. She can bear a child who will become the heir of the Egyptian throne, and she had to hide to care for the hunted child who had to live in hiding under the tall branches of the papyrus in the swamps of a delta in the north of Egypt. And many of his former father allies gathered around the young child to protect him. And when Horus reached adulthood, his image changed from a human image into an eagle image. And he started recruiting soldiers for his army in order to regain the usurped throne of Egypt. Set in his reign was able to create many enemies because of his tyranny. Many of those enemies gathered under the leadership of Horus and created a huge army to face Seth and his soldiers. Seth always claimed that he is the only heir of the throne of Egypt after his brother died without children, and he often accused Isis of adultery, and the child that she had is not the son of Osiris. And deep inside he wished that he was right. But when the two armies faced and he saw Horus, he was able to recognize Horus and his eyes. It looked exactly like his father's eyes, Osiris. He knew these eyes very well, and he hated these eyes. That look that his brother gave him when they were played as children wrestling, when he defeated him often. And he looked at him with these eyes, and Set recognized Horus, and he was defeated before the war even started. The battle started, and soon Set was defeated. In a final desperate attempt to kill Horus, Set converted himself into a hippopotamus, and he charged at Horus. Hippopotamus in Egypt were the most dangerous animals of all, and it killed more Egyptians than any other animals, even lions. Actually, this didn't change much, even in the modern time in Africa. Set charged at Horus in the form of a gigantic hippopotamus, but the brave god stood his ground, and he stabbed Seth with his spear, knocking him unconscious. And later, Seth awake, finding himself chained in steel chains, shamed with his defeat and betrayal of his brother. In a huge victory procession, Horus celebrated his coronation, headed by goddess Isis, Hathor, dancing and singing with drums. Horus did not kill his uncle, but he rather banished him to the desert to repent his sins. Set spent the rest of his nights protecting the solar boat of God Ra, fighting his enemies every night in an endless battle against evil. Horus became the king of Egypt and married goddess Hathor. Osiris, the betrayed, became the king of the underworld, and he judges people in the final judgment to decide who deserve to go to paradise and enjoy the fields of Iaru, and who will spend the rest of eternity in the caves of fire in hell because of their crimes. The temple of god Horus is the largest of all created during the Greco-Roman time. It took over 180 years to construct the temple. Half of it was spent in the construction of the building, and the other half was spent decorating of the walls and making the reliefs on the pillars and coloring the beautiful temple. This temple remained undestroyed as it was used throughout ages as a fortress during the Roman Christian times. The temple lost most of its gorgeous colors that started to clear out slowly through the restoration attempts and cleaning during the recent times by the Egyptologists. This temple is surrounded with a huge mud brick enclosure wall that still stands of 30 feet high. At the gateway to the temple on the left, we can see the birth house that celebrates god Horus' childhood, and the remains of the color still can be seen, covered with many offering scenes for goddess Isis, Horus, and Hathor. In front of the open court of the temple, we can see the stage for the sound and light show. It's a beautiful show, a must-see if you are lucky enough to spend the night in Edfu. The pylon of this temple is decorated with a traditional scene of King Ptolemy XII punishing his enemies in front of god Horus, Isis, and Hathor. Windows were added on top of the pylons during the Christian Roman times when the temple was used as a fortress for the guards to observe the surroundings of the temple. Two broken statues of god Horus can be seen at the gateway of the temple, and we can go through the gateway to the open court surrounded by 4 arcades and its pillars decorated with floral capitals, lotus, papyrus, and palm tree capitals. On the left-hand side wall, lots of beautiful decoration showing the sacred boat offerings and a scene for the king coronation with King Ptolemy. And we noticed that in this area many empty cartouches, as the name of the king was usually written inside using paint to make it easy to remove it and replace it with the new king name after the king of Egypt is dead. So the decoration inside the temple will be kept updated with the name of the living recent king. The open court in this temple symbolizes the medieval ocean water from which life started, surrounding the pyramidal island on which life have started at the beginning of creation. And this is the philosophy of the design of the temple. At the gateway to the first colonnade, we find 2 large statues of god Horus as an eagle in a much better condition than those outside the temple, from red granite. Usually the visitors would be crowded around the statues to take photos with it. And it is distinguished by the double crown on the head of the eagle to confirm that god Horus became the king of the north and the south kingdoms of Egypt. First colonnade has 2 rows of pillars, 12 in number, decorated with fantastic floral capitals of lotus, papyrus, and palm. On both sides of the entrance, there is 2 small chambers, one to store the golden tools and vessels, which is used by the priest to give the offering, and it is called the house of gold, while the other chamber on the left called the library, and this is where the priest kept the papyruses containing the prayers that the priest chant during the services and rituals during daily prayers. The pillars of the first colonnade is huge, 70 foot each, cut from the sandstone quarries of Silsila mountain, few miles away from Edfu. The wall on the left side of the colonnade is decorated with amazing decoration, some of the most important in Egypt, representing the rituals of the foundation of the temple. The king appears in these celebrations, celebrating the opening and the foundation of the temple. The first scene showing the king digging the wedges, which is marking the 4 cornerstones of the temple in front of goddess Isis and god Horus. The second rituals showing the king measuring the length, heights, and width of the temple using a ruler in his hand. And another ritual of the king throwing nitro salt from a bucket in his hand. The nitro salt is used to clean and purify the holy grounds of the temple, to prepare the grounds of the temple to receive the gold statue of god Horus. And another scene showing the king giving a model made out of wood that represents the temple, and it's a ritual that's called giving the temple to its lord in front of god Horus. And finally, the last scene is showing the king of Egypt giving an oath, making a pledge in front of god Horus to confirm to him that he will keep the temple open and he will provide the temple of all what's needed to keep it functioning temple. And this is a very important ritual because the people of Egypt believe that performing the offering rituals to the gods of Egypt is the secret to the stability and the prosperity of Egypt, and neglecting any of these holy duties will bring crisis and famine to the land of Egypt. We proceed now to the second colonnade, which is distinguished by its smaller pillars, 50 foot high each, 12 pillars in number, divided into 3 rows each. The pillars are floral capital similar to those in the first colonnade, and the ceiling of the second colonnade was stained by the black smoke caused by the Roman using this area of the temple for cooking and burning fire for heating. The most important decoration in the second colonnade at both sides, right and left, in the front wall, representing the king burning incense in front of the procession of the sacred boat, carried by the priest of the temple. On the right-hand side, the sacred boat representing goddess Hathor, while coming to the temple of her husband, god Horus, to celebrate with him the festival that continues for 24 days. And on the left-hand side, a similar scene representing the king burning incense in front of the sacred boat carried by priest. However, the sacred boat here is representing god Horus leaving the temple of Edfu to go to his wife's temple in the city of Dandara, where they will spend together a 24 days celebration. On the left hand side, we can see a small chamber, one of the most unique chambers in the Pharaonic temples. That small chamber is extremely important, as the text on the chamber contains hundreds of recipes of perfumes. These sacred recipes were only allowed to the priest of the temple to produce all these perfumes, which is offered to the goddess and the god of the temple. And it also mentions ways to make the perfumes, which was very popular in Egypt, making Egypt the center of perfume industry in the whole world. And lots of offering scenes in representing Ptolemy and his wife Queen Cleopatra giving perfume offering to the gods of the temple. We proceed now to two antechambers. The first antechamber contains on both right-hand side and left-hand side entranceway leading to the stairway that leads to the roof of the temple. And that stairway was often used by the priest in order to take the solid gold statues of the god up to the roof of the temple to expose them to the sunlight from time to time to regenerate these statues. The second antechamber on the right hand side contains an entrance that leads to the shrine of goddess Hathor. The shrine's entrance is decorated with a representation of the face of goddess Hathor. However, inside that chamber, which is decorated with scenes showing the king giving offerings to goddess Hathor, there is an amazing scene on the ceiling, which is representing goddess Nut, the goddess of the sky, decorated and painted in blue color, and her body was filled with stars decoration in yellow, and she looks bent over as a dome that covers the whole scope of heaven. The Holy of Holies of this temple is one of the biggest in an Egyptian temple, and it has lots of decoration representing the king giving offerings to god Horus. And it had a huge gateway made out of wood covered with gold. The Holy of Holies is the most sacred place in the temple, and only the high priest of the temple is allowed inside. He would go in person to perform the rituals of the offering in front of the solid gold statue of the god Horus at dawn, and he would bring out the last day offering, and he would bring fresh offering inside, and then wipe the statue and remove the last night perfume and perfume the gold statue with precious perfumes. The solid gold statue of the god would remain inside the sanctuary all year long. In the rare occasion when the statue is brought outside, it would be placed in the open court during the annual celebration, and it is almost the only chance for people to see the statue. Usually, the statue of god Horus would not leave the temple, except during his visit to his wife's temple, goddess Hathor in Dandara. The Holy of Holies, or the sanctuary of the temple, is surrounded by 10 chambers, 4 on the right, 4 on the left, and 2 behind. These chambers are usually used as storage room and also guest room for the visiting gods and goddesses' gold statues during their usual visits to the temple of god Horus, like goddess Hathor, Isis, and Osiris. It contains lots of offering scenes to the gods of the temple, also coronation scenes for King Ptolemy, and some of them maintain some colors that reflects the former beauty of the decoration of this temple. We notice lots of small shafts behind the Holy of Holies, leads to underground dungeons and chambers used as treasury to keep the precious belonging of the temple, such as jewelry, money, and gold. Upon exiting the temple, you can go out through the left-hand side doorway inside the small colonnade, and this would bring you to a narrow corridor between the temple and the interior wall of the temple made of stone, and it contains amazing decoration in a very large scale for both the king of Egypt and the gods, and he's giving offerings to them. We also noticed the water drains at the top of the wall of the temple, taking the shape of lions, and this we notice this amazing openings all over the walls outside the temple. These narrow openings in a horizontal way would allow the direct sunlight to access the temple and bring light into the inside of the temple in an amazing, very complicated architectural design, which will keep the temple illuminated with the light of the sun. There is a replica for the sacred boat made out of wood that would show you the small boat which contains small shrine on top of it that is usually used to keep the solid gold statue of the god, and it has 2 handles like a palanquin, which will allow the priest to carry the sacred boat with the gold statue of the god inside and bring it outside during the celebration. Now we proceed through the corridor where we can see stairway that would lead to the Nilometer of the temple on the right hand side. However, at the end of this corridor we have a very important scene, which is showing god Horus stabbing the hippopotamus, which is represented in the scene with chains tying down both his feet and mouth, who was dragged in humiliation in the victory procession of god Horus, where goddess Isis and Hathor dancing and singing and playing the drums as a representation of the victory of god Horus over his uncle Sis. A big celebration is held every year where the king of Egypt would come and wear a mask of god Horus, the eagle face, and he would stab a small young hippopotamus and kill it as an offering rituals. On your way out from the temple, you can have a look on the open air museum exhibiting antiquities which have been discovered in the recent excavations around the temple of god Horus. You can visit the temple using a horse carriage that stands alongside the river Nile Corniche, but you have to bargain and agree on the price with the carriageman before you hire him. There is a nice market outside the temple with beautiful souvenirs. However, it will take you some time to bargain to get a good price